In chapter 22, we go on to talk about subjunctives. Now, the subjunctive is a mood of a verb. We've talked quite a bit in this textbook and in these videos about indicative verbs. Indicative verbs present something as a statement of fact. Hey, this is going to happen. Now, someone can lie when they're speaking in the indicative, but they're presenting it as a statement of fact. At its base level, the subjunctive mood of the verb is demanded in certain constructions after expressions of purpose or indefinite time or condition with this. Like there's certain words or constructions that demand the subjunctive. Many of those subjunctives have some element of indefiniteness to them, right? Maybe we're leaving open when it will happen or who will do it. Maybe we're even leaving open when it is done. So it's a little bit of an oversimplification, but if we say the indicative is about fact, the subjunctive is about leaving something open or indefiniteness. And I would say that covers, I'm just approximating 70% of subjunctives. There may be 30% that really don't fit that idea of indefiniteness, and they're just used because the construction, the Greek construction, demands that they be used. Okay, so sometimes we're oversimplifying this when we're teaching beginning students. Here's an indicative verb, lues, translated you are loosing. Okay, now look down below. This is the subjunctive. Notice there's a spelling change. So that spelling change is communicating to the speaker, the writer is communicating to their listener, hey, there's something different about this verb. And this is an oversimplification, but it's almost like there's a should, a may, a might, a would. There's almost like that squashed down into that spelling change to you may be loosing, right? As opposed to you're loosing, you may be. And again, it's going to often follow, whenever you may be loosing or whoever, something like that. So we have these little introductory words that let us know it's coming. And again, this is a real oversimplification, but that spelling change is almost like taking the word may or might and squashing it down into the form itself and letting that form communicate some contingency, some openness, some indefiniteness. Okay, an example from the New Testament, from 1 John 1:6, and you already know from your vocabulary that on means if, and it's followed by the subjunctive. So if we say ean epomen, and you don't know some of these other words yet maybe, but we'll just give the English translation. If we say we have fellowship with him, John says, while we walk in darkness, we lie and do not practice the truth. Now, why would John here use the subjunctive when he could have just used a plus the indicative? What's the added nuance of meaning by on plus the subjunctive? Well, notice here, if you read the rest of 1 John, John really does believe the people to whom he's writing know God and are walking with him. But there's a group that's broken off and they're living immorally and lovelessly and they have flawed theology, and John is sort of teaching about what is true Christianity. True Christians believe these things. True Christians are known by the love and the righteousness that's evident in their life as fruit of their faith. And so if you look at this, he's really using we here, right? We, and he's talking about something that is not true of him and the people to whom he's writing. They're not hypocrites. They're not claiming to have fellowship with God while walking in the darkness. They're not lying. They're not failing to practice the truth. And so I think because he's using the first person plural, that's why he's using the more tentative, the more removed from reality word for if followed by the subjunctive. It'd be almost like we turn the lights down and say, hey guys, let's consider something for a second. What if we were to say that we had fellowship with God and at the same time we were walking in the darkness? What would that say? What could we conclude about? Do you see how we would qualify that in English? Like, what if we were to say, hey guys, think about this? That's what that does. And let's just be honest, if you're not reading this in Greek, you're just reading the English translation, you're missing some of the nuance there. There's a lot of good news with the subjunctive. Okay, there really is. One part of the good news with the subjunctive is it only uses two sets of endings, and their endings you already know, slightly tweaked. So let's think about the first two verbal endings that you learned, right? O, ace, a, amen, eta, usen, right? The first two verbal endings, that's one of the first two, and the other one is omai, a, etai, amatha, estha, antai. These are the same endings for the subjunctive with tiny little change. Okay, so we have to, if there is a vowel that can be lengthened at the beginning, we have to lengthen that, and then sometimes, occasionally, it will affect other things. So this looks the same. This, the epsilon lengthens to an eta, the iota subscript, so we end up with ace. Epsilon lengthens to an eta, iota subscripts. This becomes omen. This becomes eta. This becomes osen. So that is half of the subjunctive endings. O, ace, a, omen, eta, osen. That is also the subjunctive form of a, me. So that's good, right? If we were following henna, so that I might be, so that you might be, so that he might be, so that we might be, so that y'all might be, so that they might be. How about these forms here? Well, the subjunctive forms here are o my, a, you can't make that any longer, atai, omatha, astha, ontai. I mean, it really is almost too good to be true, right? Those are the only subjunctive endings. Now, to be honest, you do drop in before them a sigma to indicate the aorist active or a theta to indicate the aorist passive, but no other changes, right? So let's look. For example, we have here the present active subjunctive right here, and we have the present middle passive subjunctive. And you'll notice that what we have are just the endings that we just did. Luo, luace, lue, luomen, lueta, luosen. Here we have luomai, lue, luetai, luomatha, luesa, luontai. Those endings we just did. You wish there were translations, but you can't really translate the subjunctive apart from context. Henna, so that, or in order that is always followed by the subjunctive, so we could practice doing that. So that I may lose, so that you may lose, so that he may lose, so that we may lose, so that y'all may lose, so that they may lose. If we wanted to try to bring out the progressive nature more clearly, we could say, so that I may be loosing, so that you may be loosing, so that he may be loosing, so that we may be loosing, so that y'all may be loosing, so that they may be loosing. Then we have the middle passive. Again, it could be passive or middle. Let's try passive first. So that I may be loosed, or that I may be being loosed. It's too difficult, isn't it, to try to render it with that progressive sense all the time, and as we just repeat through the chart quickly. So let me just do it a little more simply. So that I may be loosed, so that you may be loosed, so that he may be loosed, so that we may be loosed, so that y'all may be loosed, so that they may be loosed. Or for the middle, so that I may loose for myself, so that you may loose for yourself, so that he may loose for himself, so that we may loose for ourselves, so that y'all may loose for yourselves, so that they may loose for themselves. Most subjunctives in the New Testament are present or aorist. There are very few that are not, right? There's a few perfect subjunctives, very few. But notice what we have here. We have the aorist active subjunctive right here. We'll highlight that. We have the aorist middle right here. And we have the aorist passive right here. And I want you to see that we're just continuing to recycle these endings. O, ace, a, omen, eta, osen. All we did there was drop in a sigma. Bam, 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 bam. You're going to be like, how do I know that's not a future? Because it's always going to be following something like a henna or a hatan or a has. You're going to have that little marker word. So you're going to know the subjunctive's coming. For the aorist middle, we drop in the sigma, and then we use those middle endings. For the aorist passive, we drop in a theta, and then we use our base endings, O, ace, a, omen, eta, osen, right? We're just continuing to recycle those simple endings over and over again. By the way, in the New Testament, roughly 2/3 of subjunctives are aorist, and roughly 1/3 of subjunctives are present. So if you come to one of these little hennas or hatans, you know the subjunctive's coming, you can't figure anything else out, just say, well, it's an aorist subjunctive, and you've got a 66% chance almost of being right. Okay, let's talk about how the subjunctive is used, right? One of the nice things about the subjunctive is you have these little bitty introductory words, and you have to know henna, so that, hapos, so that. You have to know those are followed by the subjunctive. Subjunctive coming, right? So let's imagine we're reading along here in Greek. These things I'm writing to you, henna, We know the subjunctive's coming. And the subjunctive is going to flavor after one of these words to the next comma or period. We also are alerted this is the subjunctive because we have may. May negates non-indicative moods. Hamarteta, we see that lengthened vowel, another marker of the subjunctive. Do you see that ending? Eta, right, with the lengthened initial vowel. Now, we could just sort of, roll the dice. Is it a present or aorist subjunctive? And again, 66% of the time we're expecting it to be aorist, or we could actually look at the word. This one's a little bit tricky because it's coming from the word hamartano, right? Hamartano. And you can see there's the hamart. What happened to that? Oh, yeah. The second aorist of hamartano is hey martan. The second aorist is hey martan. And so the aorist of this, we yank off the augment, and that gives us an alpha. So the second aorist stem is hamart, and then we use the present subjunctive ending. So that is a second aorist subjunctive. So that you might not sin. So that you will not sin. These things I am writing to you so that you will not sin. So that you might not sin. So that you would not sin. Again, why is the subjunctive used? The subjunctive is used because following hina and hapos, expressing purpose or result, you must use the subjunctive, right? It's just demanded by the construction. The subjunctive is also used after has on, whoever. That is an indefinite relative, right? Has is who, or ha is what, but if we throw in the on after that, it becomes whoever and whatever. Okay, also after hatan, which is whenever, or heosan, which is until. So you just have to know when you have this, the subjunctive's coming. So here we go. Hasan, we know it's going to flavor, the subjunctive's going to flavor the sentence to the comma. And we look here, we see that lengthened vowel. Oh yeah, that is a subjunctive, lengthened connective vowel. Oh, I see a sigma's combined in. This is going to be an aorist subjunctive. Oh, it's a middle. So that's just an aorist middle subjunctive. Whoever receives me, right, receives the one who sent me. Notice when there's a punctuation mark, like a comma or a period, that stops the subjunctive influence, and you won't have, the introductory word says subjunctive's coming, but once there is a comma or period, the air is clear again, and you'll have indicative moods. Okay, so the other example here, bullet point number 2, hatan. You just have to have that word memorized whenever, and then the subjunctive's coming. Lengthened vowel, and you don't see any sigmas or thetas. This is just from the word prasukomai, to pray. Prasuko, a middle only verb. So this is a middle, it's a present middle subjunctive. Whenever you are praying, right? Whenever you pray, and then there's a comma, so the subjunctive influence ends, and the rest of the verse goes on. From Matthew 6:5, don't be like the hypocrites. Whenever you're praying, comma, okay? Another construction that demands the subjunctive, and in this case, I'd have to say I don't see really any element of indefiniteness, really any element of contingency. It's extremely certain in some ways. You have ume followed by the subjunctive, and it's a way in Greek of saying absolutely not. Okay, not at all. So we have here seeing. You will see kai ume. We know the subjunctive is coming. There's a lengthened vowel. Perhaps you recognize this is coming from the second aorist stem of adon, from harao or blepo. So our real stem there is id, plus the subjunctive, second person plural ending. You will never ever see. You will never ever perceive. Right? The ume, we have to render some emphatic negation in English. Certainly not, never ever, never, something like that. At its base level, what are you doing? You're putting these little bitty words, ume, hatan, hasan, heosan, henna, hapos. You're putting those in your little toolbox, and you're saying, I know when these come, the subjunctive will follow, and I will look for it. Okay? Also, as we saw in the example at the beginning from 1 John, when we have on, which is if, or on may, if not, or unless, it will be followed by the subjunctive. We're bebopping along in the Greek New Testament. On, we know the subjunctive is going to flavor the sentence till the comma. We see this word doxaso. We say, well, I see a sigma has been added in because I know my lexical form so well. I'm not confused by that, and I know that the lexical form is doxazo. Sigma, knock that out. So this is an aorist active subjunctive, first person singular. And if I glorify, and you could say, if I might glorify myself, if I may glorify myself, if I should glorify myself. Students, sometimes beginning students, they want to add a word should, would, may. You don't have to, right? That's sufficiently communicated by the word if, right? But if that helps you to think about that now as a subjunctive conveying an idea of may, might, that's okay to add that in too. Someone, a astute student here is saying, how do I know that's not the future? You know that's not the future because it's following on. So it's going to be subjunctive, right? Because it looks like the future. By the way, in the Koine period, sometimes the future is found where we would expect the subjunctive, especially in the book of Revelation. So there's kind of slippage taking place between the future and the subjunctive because they are often spelled and pronounced the same, and they're often referring to activity that hasn't happened yet. So there's quite a bit of overlap in nuance and then beginning to be overlap in usage, okay? So especially in the book of Revelation. So if I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. The second bullet point, on may, if not or unless. We know the subjunctive's coming. It's going to flavor the clause or the sentence to the comma or the period. So unless these people, oh, there's my subjunctive, lengthen vowel. I know this is from the verb minnow, but there's been a spelling change. I wonder why. Oh, sigma rejected, lengthen, so that get lengthened. So this is just an aorist active subjunctive, first person, aorist active subjunctive, third person plural. Unless they remain in the boat, you are not able to be saved. You yourselves cannot be saved. Unless they should remain in the boat, unless they might remain in the boat. You don't have to add may or might. Just say unless they remain, right? That contingency is communicated by the words unless, right? By that. In this chapter, let me also just briefly mention that we go over the different classes of conditional sentences. What is a conditional sentence? A conditional sentence is an if-then sentence, right? If this, then that. And in Greek, there are 4 ways to do that, okay? First is the first-class conditional sentence where you have a plus the indicative. And in this, the condition's the if part, is assumed true for the sake of argument. One way, and I'll let you read through these examples in the textbook, but one way to keep this straight is for the first-class conditional, you're looking for one thing. You're looking for a, right? That's a first-class conditional sentence. The condition, technical name for the if part, is the protasis. The protasis and the then part is called the apodosis. Sounds like you're raising hippopotami or something, but the protasis and the apodosis, that's the if part and the then part. And for the first-class condition, it's just like the first part is assumed true for the sake of argument at least. The second-class condition has an a in the first part and an on in the second part. Okay, so in the if part of the sentence, there's an a, and in the comma in the second part, we're expecting an on. And this is called a contrary to fact. If this had happened, then this other thing would not have happened or something like that. So if you had been here, right? If you had been here, Lazarus' sister says to Jesus, my brother would not have died, right? So if this had happened, it didn't happen, then this would have happened, right? So notice an a in the first part and on in the second. One way to keep that straight, that's a second-class conditional. You're looking for 2 things. 1, 2. You're looking for the word a and you're looking for the word on. Next is third-class conditional. That's sort of a hypothetical projection, more remote, like we did the example at the beginning from 1 John. Hey, let's think about what if this were to happen, guys, right? That's how we might communicate that in English. Just turn the lights down. Let's run the camera for a minute. Imagine this scenario. So for this, you're looking for 1, 2, 3. A 3-letter word. That's a third-class conditional. It's a little silly memory devices, but this is what we're doing. First-class conditional, looking for 1 word. 1, first class. Second class, looking for 2 words. 1, 2, second class. Third class, looking for a 3-letter word. 1, 2, 3. Third class conditional. And then the fourth class conditional is so rare in Coin-A, but it's A plus the optative. And the condition is presented as an extremely remote possibility.